Hello beautiful friends, I am here today with another video for you in my scrapbooking tips, tricks and tutorials series. I mentioned in a recent video that I was planning on sharing a tutorial with you on how I use my Silhouette Studio software along with my Cameo to cut the backing pieces for intricate cut files. Now, the cut file that I'm actually going to be backing this time is an exclusive from the Hit Kit Club. I have been subscribed to them for a couple of months, so I've grabbed some of their cut files to use with their kits. And this one is, as you can see, says Grateful, and it's got all these beautiful floral pieces included at the top of it. Now, there are many ways to back a cut file, and there are many videos showing you the different ways that you can do those. For me personally, I do use a combination, but with things like this, I just find I get really impatient with the fiddliness of tracing and cutting and gluing each of these little filling pieces. So I like to use my software and my Cameo, and I've come up with a little way of making it just a little bit easier to achieve, and we'll hop over to my desktop and run through that now. Okay, so here we are over on my desktop. I've got my Silhouette Studio software open with my cut file here in the desktop. A couple of things I will mention is that I use the designer edition of Silhouette Studio, and I also have a Silhouette Cameo 4. So I am aware that there are some features that are only available in the designer edition, and there are some features that are only available for people with newer Silhouette machines. If you find that any of the features that I'm accessing throughout these tutorials aren't available for you, it could be due to one of those two things. But this tutorial is using some really basic tools, so I don't believe that's going to be an issue this time around. I have switched the grid lines off because I find when I'm doing this kind of work, the grid lines get a little bit too distracting for me. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control and plus to zoom in on my design, and then scroll up to bring it into the center of the screen. If you're on a Mac, I believe the equivalent to the Control key is Command. Now, the way that I set this up and make it easy for myself so that I don't get lost about which pieces I'm cutting from which patterned paper is I'm going to go through and I'm going to color this whole, or fill in this whole design with colors according to the pattern papers that I'm going to be using. If I select the cut file now, because it's all one piece, you can see I can't actually click on any of these individual pieces. It's going to select the whole cut file. So the first thing that I want to do is right click and release compound path. And that is now allowing me to select each of those individual pieces so that I can fill those in. We're not actually manipulating any of the cut lines just yet. All we're doing is we're going and we're going to be coloring in this whole cut file, as I said, so that we know which pieces are going to be cut from the different pattern papers. I'm going to select the insides of these flowers first because that seems to be a quite simple approach. So I'm just selecting this first one. I'm holding down my Shift key and I'm going to go and select each of those little internal pieces. I want to make sure I'm getting the inside piece. And coming over here to my panel on the right hand side, this little paint palette is called the Fill panel. I'm going to open that up and I'm going to select a yellow. And you can see now that that's turned each of those inside pieces into a yellow color. Then I think I'm going to come and do all of the petals on this flower, and because I know that I want these petals to be cut from a different patterned paper, I am going, whoop, clicked too many. I'm going to choose a different color. I think I will choose this orange color here. Same with this flower is going to be another orange color. I find the way that my brain works, I find it easier to choose colors that are going to be quite close to what I intend to use for the patterned paper. That's just the way that my mind works. Your mind might work a little bit differently. So I think then I will go and start picking up some of the leaves and I'm just going to go and click. Again, I'm holding my shift key down as I'm clicking each of these, and I'm going to select, actually, I don't think I'm going to select those pieces. Sorry, I'm thinking out loud here. I can see I've got some more leaf patterns here, here. I'm just looking for those leaves right now that have got the split down the middle of them. Another one here, another one here. And then I'm going to select this green here to fill each of those pieces in. And then what we might do now is we might just hop on fast forward while I select and color all of the rest of the pieces of this cut file, and then we'll come back in once I'm done with that. So now we have each of those sections colored in, and you can see just from looking at it here that this is kind of how it's going to look once it's been backed with the different pattern papers. The first thing that I'm going to do before I go any further is I'm going to select the whole thing. I'm going to Control C and Control V to create a copy, and then I'm going to drag that copy over to the side of my screen. I'm going to select it all and make it a, no, not make it a compound path, undo that, and just group it together. And that's just so that at any point I've got a point of reference that I can come back to if something happens while I'm working with this file over here. Okay, so now we've got all of our pieces colored. This is going to make it so much easier to split it all up and separate it into sections to send off to our machine. Now we need to start working on creating some offsets, because of course if I just cut each of these pieces as they are, they're going to be sitting inside the file that I have cut. So I want them to extend out a little bit so that I've got something to adhere to the back of the cut file. We have already released the compound path, so now I can go ahead and select the outside of this file, and this is going to pick up the outline of the whole cut file, and I can delete that. So already you can see that what I have got left, you can see I've still got some of the outside cut lines here, and I will go through now and delete all of them, because the only cut pieces that I need are the pieces that have been colored in. We've done that work already. So again, we'll just hop on fast forward quickly while I go through and delete all of these pieces. So that's done now. The next thing I like to do, just to make things a little bit easier for myself, is to come through and group all of the sections that are the same color. So with these ones here, it's quite easy. I can select them all, right click, group, and then I can move them off to the side. And that piece has just been left behind there, and that's okay. Let me just see how that's going to cut out. Yep, that's fine. And then I'm going to group all of these and move them off to the side. For these, I'm going to select them all individually and group them together. And the only reason that I'm moving these off to the side as I'm working, I missed a couple pieces there, is just to keep my space a little bit clearer to help me, because now it's going to get a little bit more fiddly. So the first thing I'm going to pick up is I'm going to pick up all of these green, darker green foliage pieces, and I am going to group them together and just move them off to the side. Then I think I'll pick up these limey green ones that I've coloured in and group all of those together, move them off. And you can see that as you go along, it is getting easier to select these pieces because there are less pieces sitting on the desktop, and the likelihood of me selecting something that I don't want to select is significantly reduced. Pick up all of these pieces here and these ones, and we are getting close to being there. All right, these ones here, I'm going to select those, and then there's a couple of tiny little pieces that you can probably see here that I don't need, but it was a little bit too fiddly for me to try and select those where they were to delete them. So for now I've just left them there, and then I can go back in and delete them in a moment. I pick up my dark pink rose, group that, move it over, and my light pink flowers, group them. Now I can come and delete these little points here and group my last set of leaves. Okay, so now I've got each of those pieces grouped together, which is going to make it easy for me to move them around and manipulate them as I need to. Now I am going to come back in and turn my grid lines back on, and the reason for that is, of course, I want to make sure that because I'm going to be using multiple different types of pattern paper on the one cutting mat, I want to know exactly how big a piece, and I want to have it all lined up, which will make sense when we go back to the overhead shooting and you can see that. Okay, so the easiest thing for me to do first of all is to move each of these grateful pieces into place here so that they've each got their own little 2-inch space. Now you may remember just a little while ago we talked about if I was to send these off to cut as they are right now, I would have a problem with because they're not offset. So sorry, I was getting lost in my train of thought there. So I'm going to need to offset these. So I'm going to select this whole line of letters, and I'm going to open up my offset panel. I'm going to hit offset. I'm going to reduce that down to I think about 0.050. Let's see how that looks. I think that should be good. So I'm going to apply that. And if I zoom in, you can see that because the letters are spaced quite closely together, it has actually welded some of them together already, which is going to make it super easy when it comes time to backing that cut file. Now I just need to remember to turn off the cut lines in the middle. And now I have got my offset piece ready to cut. I'm going to repeat that here with this one. 0.050, apply, and then remove my centerpieces. And you can see that when I do remove that centerpiece, it's also removing the shading, but that's not such a big problem because we've kept it over here so we can still see. This is part of the reason why this will come in really handy when you trying to figure out which pieces go where, is being able to see all of the different colors that you selected here will help you match up the pieces to your cut file once you've cut the filling pieces, if that makes sense. Offset 0.050, apply, and then get rid of those internal pieces. Now this flower is going to be pretty straightforward. It can just sit in a spot on its own. Obviously, I don't want to just have this spaced out the way that it is here. So I'm going to ungroup this, and I'm going to group each of the little pieces together individually now. And then I can, so I'm going to not rotate any of my pieces. That for me is important because that means that my pattern papers are going to be facing up the right way when I send this to cut on my machine. So I'm going to bring those up there. I might have to just space them out a little bit. Then I'm going to bring the insides of my flowers in here. And when I'm placing these, I want to make sure that they are spaced a little bit further apart. And the reason that I'm doing that is because once again, we need to offset. So I'm going to offset those at 0.050, hit apply, because if I had those closer together, you would get the same effect as you have here where the offsets would join. And because these pieces don't sit adjacent to each other in the cut file, in the file, I don't want any of them to weld together once I hit that offset. So I'm just going to delete the insides of each of those. And with this flower, if I hit offset and I'm doing 0.050 and I hit apply, if that one is all one piece, that's not an issue because it's going to be backing that whole file over the top there. Okay, so we might hop on fast forward again while I move all of these pieces around and offset them, and then we will come back on to finish off. Okay, so that is the last step that we need to take in the Silhouette software to get ready to cut each of these pieces. So I'm going to zoom out again, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip over to my live camera or to my overhead camera so you can see how I set up my cutting mat to cut each of these sections using a different piece of pattern paper. And this is where having that grid switched on comes in really handy because it shows me, I know that this is 2 inches and that this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 inches. So I know that this piece of paper is going to need to be 2 inches by 7 inches. Now, as I'm talking to you, I have noticed that this little flower here, it's going to be quite tight. So I'm going to move these ones down, not that one. This guy can come back up here and over here, and then these ones will move down here just a little. Okay, let's hop back onto the overhead camera and see how I set up my cutting mat. Okay, so here is my cutting mat all ready to go, loaded up with all the different pieces of patterned paper. So as I was doing this, I was using the design that I have on my workspace on my computer as a point of reference, and then selecting some patterned papers and making sure that I was using the grid lines on the design on the computer along with the grid lines that are printed here on my cutting mat, and just making sure that they are lined up as best as they possibly can be. So one little tip that I have when you are setting up your cut lines or your cut design in your software is try to make sure that you don't have anything that is going to be sitting too close to the actual grid lines. That just gives you some leeway so that if your pattern paper is not quite sitting flush up against it, or for some reason your silhouette is just, you know, a couple of millimeters off when it's cutting, you're not going to lose the design cutting off the edge of that pattern paper. All right, I'm going to send this to my Cameo and then we will jump back on one more time to see how all of the cut pieces finish up. Okay, so there we have it. All of my pieces, I've zoomed you in nice and close so you can see all of my pieces have been cut out on each of these patterned papers and they are ready to use to back my cut file. Now, one thing that I will mention, which I think is important, is when I am backing a cut file this way, I prefer, rather than pulling everything off the cutting mat, I prefer to just pull the backings off and keep the pieces stuck down, and that helps me to, when I've got like little pieces like these ones here, and particularly these ones down here, which are the little pieces of foliage, I find that by keeping it on my cutting mat, it helps me refer back to what I've got in my design space on my computer and figure out where each of these pieces go. So that's it for this tutorial. I won't make you watch me going through the tedious task of backing this cut file with adhesive because I think that's pretty straightforward. But that's it for this tutorial. Stay tuned to my channel though, because I will upload a process video on how I use this cut file coming very shortly. If you are new to my channel, I would love for you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that you can stay in the loop for all the videos that I have coming up. If you have been here for some time, as always, thank you so much for all of your support. I will leave it there and say thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.